Hello. Oh, it is so nice to see everybody. So we are going to get started. I am Leora from the Network for Social Justice, and it is really a pleasure to welcome everyone here tonight. This is, for the network anyway, as one of the co-hosts for this evening, this is the first in-person program that we have run since March 6th, 2020. And it is fantastic to see everyone in person, be able to shake a hand, wave. Please help yourselves and offer food. So at any time throughout this program, help yourselves to some snacks on the side there. So I'm really excited about tonight's amazing program. It's my pleasure to speak tonight to you not from the Network for Social Justice, but on behalf of the Winchester Housing Coalition, a grassroots group formed in 2021 to create organized, sustained, and broad community support to advance diversified and affordable housing here in Winchester. Our efforts to date have included organized targeting educational campaigns, some of which you guys have been part of online for the last couple years, Who Lives in Winchester being the first two-part series. We've done some grassroots advocacy. We've done some supporting affordable housing policies and support for implementation approaches. You've seen us at the farmers market, you've seen us on Town Day, and we're gonna get started here this fall, sort of after this program. I'm excited to have many of the folks from this coalition here with us tonight. You can find them based on their nifty name tags. In concluding the panel, we would really be happy if you went up to them, talked to folks, and found out what we're doing with the coalition and how you can get involved. I wanted to take one last moment to thank those who have made this program a truly collaborative town-wide event, and really an event even beyond Winchester, underscoring for me the centrality of the role that housing plays across sectors and interests. In the audience, we have Senator Lewis joining us tonight, and we have a whole bunch of Winchester community sponsors. We have the League of Women Voters, and you're going to hear from one of them in a moment. We have Parish of the Epiphany, the Winchester Coalition for a Safer Community, the Winchester Farmers Market, and the Jenks. And of course, none of this tonight's program or the work that we've done in the last couple months would have been possible without the support of Beth Israel Lahey Health Winchester Hospital. Thank you again for being with us tonight. I hope you'll stick around after the panel for the community discussion that follows, and I'm gonna pass it along so we can get started here tonight.
Thank you, Leora. I'm Susan Verdicchio with the Winchester League of Women Voters, and I just very briefly wanted to welcome you and say how happy the League of Women Voters is to be co-sponsoring this event and to be involved with the coalition. This is all based on a long-standing League position recognizing that adequate housing is a basic human need, and also calling for the creation of more rental and ownership housing that is affordable to families of low and moderate incomes in all communities. Following the League's process of shared fact-finding, study, and grassroots discussion and consensus building by local leagues across the Commonwealth, the League's 1960s fair housing position has evolved over the ensuing decades to support programs, policies, and regulations to increase the housing supply to meet the needs of families of limited means. These programs and policies include the so-called anti-snob zoning law, which we refer to as Chapter 40B these days, maintaining the affordability of subsidized housing units in perpetuity, ensuring that income eligibility levels are adjusted periodically to reflect current economic factors, adequate support for local housing authorities, including Winchester Housing Authority, and being sure to meet statewide affordable housing goals through the abolition of local restrictive zoning requirements and through smart growth incentive programs. You can read more about this League position at the state level League, the Massachusetts League of Women Voters website. So we're looking forward to hearing from this knowledgeable and distinguished panel and to tonight's conversations. Thank you. I'll turn things over to our moderator, Tom Howley.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Susan. I'm Tom Howley. I am currently chair of the Council on Aging, but I've been involved in various volunteer capacities for the town for a number of years. And Leora, I want to thank you for all the work you've done to frame this and pull it together and to get us here, and of course all the sponsors who have made it possible. And I also want to thank all of you for taking the time tonight to be engaged in the civic life of your community. It's a hugely, hugely important thing. Perhaps it's never been more important in many ways. So why are we here? Tonight, with the help of our three speakers, we hope to better understand the ways that housing instability is linked to poor physical and mental health outcomes for children and for adults. We hope to leave here tonight with a new shared appreciation of why housing has emerged as a key social determinant of health, and the critical role that affordable, high-quality housing plays in supporting a healthy and inclusive community. We will hear through studies and personal stories how housing instability has impacted individuals and families in Boston and other large urban areas, and increasingly in more affluent suburban communities like Winchester. We hope to gain a new understanding for how the burden of the exorbitant cost of housing in Massachusetts falls particularly hard on the most vulnerable, those who are cognitively challenged, people with already compromised health or disabilities, children and older residents, people on fixed incomes, people who may be our neighbors. So that is what our panelists will help us with, trying to reach that understanding, a clearer insight. But then there's your part. If the presentation raises questions or ideas for you, I really, really hope that you will share them with the panelists and also with each other. We need to learn from each other. We all need to learn from each other's thoughtfulness, experience, and engagement. And so after all of our panelists have spoken, and they each may be speaking for 10 or 15 minutes, I'm hoping that you will have questions and ideas for them. Perhaps our panelists even will have questions and ideas for each other, and we'd all like to listen in on that, I know. So I'm going to do my best to encourage you and to moderate where necessary, but mostly I'm just going to get out of the way. So in many ways, tonight's topic, which is, as you know, health begins at home, and the challenge and opportunities that it suggests for our state, for Greater Boston, and for Winchester, asks us to reimagine Winchester for the 21st century as part of a more diverse and more equitable Commonwealth. We come to this conversation tonight knowing that creating housing that is affordable for low and moderate income people comes with challenges, even in a community like ours. Land values are stunningly high, leading to new projects of large scale and different style than the surrounding neighborhood. Projects may require public investment or subsidy and produce less tax revenue to sustain quality schools and services that high-income units might produce. So this is really not easy stuff, as we know. But in the absence of more affordable housing options, low and even moderate income families cannot become part of our community, narrowing opportunity and enrichment for them and for us. Most of our town employees and teachers cannot live in the community in which they contribute so much. Some older residents who have raised their children and built their friendships here over generations must move, and some, in this time of high inflation, even must make choices between food, medicine, and housing costs, often becoming more isolated as they do. These are losses for all of us, and what should we do? What can we do about them? If we want to strengthen Winchester as we have been, which is a caring and connected community for people of all ages that aspires to equity, diversity, and inclusion, not leaving people behind, and we want this long-standing character of our community to carry deep into the 21st century, what priorities and values must we affirm? What strategies and policies should we embrace? More specifically for tonight, what investments should we make now in creating more affordable housing? We can't do everything, we know that. So why do we need high-quality, affordable housing in our community, and what role will it play in supporting a healthy and inclusive community? These are questions for all of us. I hope that you will listen and you will engage tonight, and that you'll find that what is being said and the conversations that we hope to have will have value for you and for our town. And so now I want to introduce our first speaker. Thank you for letting me go on like that. Our first speaker, which we're very fortunate to have this panel, by the way, which you're all going to find out, is Dr. Megan Sandel, is the co-lead principal and investigator with Children's Health Watch, a consortium of health policy experts who research the impact of policies and economic conditions on the health of low-income children and families, with a particular focus on housing, hunger, and energy. She is also the co-director of the GROW Clinic at Boston Medical Center. She even has her stethoscope on, in case you're wondering, but just to confirm that. And an associate professor of pediatrics at Boston University Schools of Medicine and Public Health. Dr. Sandel is the former pediatric medical director of Boston Healthcare for the Homeless Program and is a nationally recognized expert on housing and child health. In 2001, she became the first medical director of the founding site for medical legal partnerships, the Medical Legal Partnership Boston. And from 2007 to 16, she served as the medical director for the National Center for Medical Legal Partnerships. She has served as a principal investigator for numerous NIH, HUD, and foundation grants, working with the Boston Public Health Commission and Massachusetts Department of Public Health to improve the health of vulnerable children, particularly with asthma. Megan has also served on many national boards, including the Enterprise Community Partners and National Advisory Committees at the American Academy of Pediatrics and the CDC Advisory Committee for Childhood Lead Poisoning and Prevention. The point of all that is that she's highly qualified. So anyway, Megan, here you go.
Great. Well, thank you, Tom. Thank you so much for the organizers of the panel tonight. I'm really thrilled to be with you. So my task is to give kind of a broad overview. We could spend decades talking about how housing and health are related. So I'm going to try to encapsulate it in 5 to 10 minutes of an overview, because I do think that, especially over the last couple of decades, we've seen a lot of research come out. And as sometimes I think for all of us, right, during the pandemic, home became everything, right? Home was where you worked. Home was where your kids went to school. Home was where you rested. Home was where you hung out, all of this. And so I sometimes think I don't have to explain that housing and health is related any longer, but I'm going to give you still kind of the 5 ways that I am starting to think more and more about housing and health. And in that, it is really about quality. I first got interested in this related to kids with asthma. I was, I came from medical school, and I was at, now it's called the Boston Combined Residency, right? Boston Medical Center, Boston Children's, and I was at the ICU, and I had admitted a kid with asthma. And as I'm doing that, I'm like tearing through her medical record, like, why is she here in the ICU? She had previously well-controlled asthma. I don't know what's going on. And I ended up asking the family kind of a fateful question, which is, what had changed? And they started to talk about, they had gotten a cat. Any guesses why they got the cat? Mice. So they had found mouse droppings in and around the kid's bed. They were really upset about it. They tried to get the landlord to make a change. Landlord wouldn't do anything, so they got the cat to get rid of the mice. And it turned out she was allergic to the cat. And so she ended up in the ICU. And for me, at an early stage in my career, it was this like eureka moment. It was like, oh my God, the thing that I want to write a prescription for is a healthier home, and that's not stocked at the pharmacy at Boston Medical Center, right? And so it was this idea of like, how do you start to think differently about a social factor, what we now call social determinant of health, as a route to healthier outcomes? And so quality, I think, is a really important one. Obviously, things like infestations or really heavy dust conditions or mold or other things, or if they're smoking in the home, are big. I also think it's really important to think about quality as a positive thing. Like, do you see green space outside your window? Do you breathe fresh air? Do you have a lot of sunlight? Right? There's amazing new research on literally if you can see a green space outside your window, you have an improved depression score. and you have lower blood pressure. And I like to say if that was on the, if I could put that in a pill, it would be on every pharmacy around, right? So quality, I think, is a really important one. I think accidents is a part of quality, right? As we think about across the lifespan, preventing a fall could be a really important part. It also can be things, for younger kids associated with, drownings or fires or things like that. So those are all really important aspects of quality. I think the second dimension I want you to kind of think about as we think about the 5 is stability. Are you going to know that you're staying in this place? And stability really runs the gambit from I'm worried I may have to leave this space. I'm worried that I may be evicted. I'm moving frequently. I'm staying with friends, and I know I can stay here temporarily, but I'm going to go somewhere else. If you stay in 3 or more places in a year, that is strongly associated with adverse health. And then ultimately, the most unstable is being unhoused, is being homeless, right? And so there's so much research about that stability. Oftentimes, the reason people are unstable is the third dimension, which is affordability, right? You're not able to afford your own home that you know you can consistently have. And so as we think about affordability, we've done some research with Children's Health Watch looking at these kind of forms of things that are associated with adverse health. And what I can tell you is that oftentimes we know that homelessness is associated with bad outcomes. In our research, actually being behind on your rent looks just as bad as being homeless in terms of maternal health, child health, depression scores, associations with food insecurity. And so this idea that Matthew Desmond wrote a book called Evicted, won the Pulitzer Prize, and in Matt's book, he has this great phrase, rent eats first. And so as we think about these more and more as housing becomes unaffordable, you can't save for that thing that you really need. You can't necessarily do a lot of the things that you want to be more like asset building and be more upwardly mobile. And so it becomes this kind of hamster wheel. So I think it's really important. It's quality, stability, affordability. The fourth one is location, is neighborhood. And more we're recognizing that it's not just okay to have a stable, decent, affordable home. Where it is matters. And there's amazing research from Raj Chetty and the Opportunity Insights Lab at Harvard looking at if you're a young kid and you live in a lower concentrated poverty neighborhood, you make 30% more over your lifetime. So having access to these higher opportunity neighborhoods becomes really critical. I'll even go one further. When I collaborated with a research colleague at Boston Medical Center, Dr. Renee Boynton-Jarrett, where we actually utilized an opportunity index that the Kirwan Institute at Ohio State laid out. And you can go on this website. It's put together by Brandeis University called diversitydatakids.org. And if you go on that website, it maps every census tract across the country and rates it as very high opportunity, moderate opportunity, low opportunity, or very low. It takes like 17 factors and creates this 5-point scale. And so what we ended up doing was looking at, in our electronic record, we start taking blood pressures at kids at age 3. That's our way to prevent long-term heart disease, is to start to detect it. And when we looked at the elevated blood pressures of 3-year-olds, right, above the 95th percentile expected for age, we saw a significantly higher prevalence in the lowest opportunity neighborhoods. So the stress of living in a low opportunity neighborhood, we could measure that in blood pressure of 3-year-olds. So you start to think about how do you think about those? And I think the fifth dimension that I more and more want to talk about is how does housing impact your health across the lifespan and across your ability? Because what our understanding is, especially with, it can be kids with autism aging into housing, or being able to stay in the home that you've lived in forever? What are the ways in which we can make it more adaptable? And so all of this new research about those intersections of a quality home, a stable home, a affordable home, in a good neighborhood where you can know your neighbors and their opportunities, and can you be able, is it adaptable across the lifespan? That's the holy grail, right? And I think one of the things that can be whenever I give this talk is it's extremely overwhelming. You're like, oh, we're never going to be able to do all of that. But I want you to try to imagine that we can actually design and plan to be able to make all of that possible. And that's what, to me, the research is showing, that we have models of being able to align the social, public health, healthcare, and housing resources to create healthier communities. And so what's our ways in which, and I'm really excited about this discussion, is how do we partner together to make it happen? And so with that, I'm gonna turn it back over to our moderator and look forward to my speakers, and then we'll hopefully open it up for questions. So thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. Fascinating, actually, right? And something to think about, I would think that we would fall into the high opportunity neighborhood category. And yet there are those within our community, I know this through the Jenks Center, whose health is compromised by the housing instability that they feel, largely through economic pressures. So there is, this does matter to us, and it does matter to people in our community. And as we look ahead, our role and responsibility, if you will, within the larger suburban communities of Boston, this is an issue and an opportunity that won't be solved unless the suburban communities start to get more involved than we have been, I think. But anyway, so our next speaker is Dana Lewinter, who returned to the Citizens Housing and Planning Association, or CHAPA, in 2018 as the Municipal Engagement Director. For those of you who may not know, CHAPA was formed in 1967 to encourage the production and preservation of housing that is affordable to low and moderate income families and individuals, and to foster diverse and sustainable communities through planning and community development. Dana worked for CHAPA from 2009 to 2011 as program manager, working on 40B, or in home ownership collaboration programs, and she previously worked as the executive director of the Massachusetts Community and Banking Council and served as the housing director for the city of Somerville. Dana holds a Bachelor of Arts in Sociology from Brandeis and a Master's in Urban Environment Policy and Planning from Tufts. Thank you very much, Dana. If that won't go, you can have this.
Did I do it? Yeah. All right. Success number one of the night. Well, thank you so much for having me here. Can folks hear me? Okay, great. I have some prepared remarks, but I also want to feel like I can talk off the cuff with you, but I want to make sure I cover all the things I wanted to cover. Thank you for having me here. Thank you, Leora and the Network for Social Justice, for inviting me. I've had the privilege of working with folks in Winchester over the last year or so, and so I recognize many of you from Zoom, but it's nice to be in this space with you and hopefully working with you moving forward. And I am really proud to be on a panel with these two because I think they bring so much to the conversation. So Tom gave a little bit about what CHAPA is. I think at the core of our work, what we believe is that every person in Massachusetts should have a safe, healthy, and affordable place to call home. Separate from our mission, that's what we all believe at our core. And more importantly, and even more so over time, we believe that housing is really at the center of the hub of work we need to create healthy, equitable, affordable, and vibrant communities. It's not just, again, the home you live in, but the community you live in. And we understand that the benefits of providing that type of ample, affordable housing and the consequences of not permeate the whole community, not just those individual outcomes. And we also understand that housing stability is core to gaining access to broader opportunities. So if you have a quality, affordable home, beyond the provision of shelter, it is a driver of your individual and community success. So where we live determines where we go to school, where we shop for food, where we play outside, where we enjoy the natural environment. It determines the air we breathe, the amount of healthy foods we have ready access to, and being able to afford your home allows you access to all of the other necessities and important amenities that we want in our lives. So we try to increase affordable housing access so that individuals and families can live in the communities that they choose and live healthier and more fulfilling lives. And I think, as Megan said, the connection between health and housing has never been clearer, but we want to build on the momentum of this moment to really obtain equitable outcomes. So unfortunately, even though we know that, Massachusetts has among the highest and fastest growing home prices and rents of any state. In Massachusetts, nearly 1 in 2 renters and 1 in 3 homeowners cannot afford their current housing costs, which leaves them at risk of foreclosure and eviction. And I did a quick dive into Winchester. 39% of renters and 25% of homeowners just here in Winchester are in that category of what we call cost burden, in that they technically are paying more for their housing than they should to be in a safe and stable position. So I want to talk a little bit about why we're so behind. Researchers at BU that we've worked closely with have observed and reviewed thousands of hours of public meetings. They've examined who is making comments on housing projects, and they've compared those comments with the general population. They found that commenters were disproportionately white, male, older, and homeowners, and they overwhelmingly showed up to oppose new housing. These comments have successfully stopped the creation of thousands of homes for Massachusetts residents. And resistance from high-income neighbors often pushes development into less affluent communities, which then leads to gentrification and displacement. The disparities that were uncovered in these neighborhood defenders research, which you can find if you go to housingpolitics.com, are kind of the legacy of nearly a century of discriminatory housing policy. So many of the housing conditions that we take for granted today and assume were accidental are actually the result of decades of discriminatory housing practices and policies at the federal, state, and local level. So it's led to a really inequitable housing system, and what we believe is that if all of these policies and practices were created by design, so too must be our remedies to undo them. So we at CHAPA have a bold plan to cultivate a stronger housing ecosystem statewide over the next 10 years so that all of our neighborhoods, towns, and villages can thrive. And I think everything I'm going to speak about here tonight that we are working towards on the state level, I'd like to see Winchester and every community in Massachusetts working towards as well. So we believe that we need 200,000 new homes by 2030. That includes 40,000 affordable homes, 20,000 deeply affordable homes. I can go into the definition of those, but essentially what we believe is for all income levels, we need more homes and we need more affordability. We believe that this will allow us to bring meaningful relief to residents. It means the kinds of things that Tom was talking about at the beginning of this presentation, that schools have teachers who can afford to live near them, that college grads can come home back to their communities where they grew up, that young families can move into the community that they choose and build a future. It means more housing on main streets, which leads to vibrant transit hubs, and it means more housing of all types to protect our environment, to improve our health, and to improve the quality of our communities. So put simply, creating more homes is essential to a thriving Massachusetts. Across CHAPA, we work across a platform of what we call our 4 Ps. It's planning, preservation, production, and people. So I want to spend a little time explaining why we think these 4 categories are so critical. And I hope, again, it will inspire you to work on these 4 platforms in your community. So we'll start with planning, which means having a vibrant, affordable, inclusive, and sustainable future. And right now, I'm sure many of you know, the biggest piece of this planning effort is the new law in Massachusetts, Chapter 3A, or the multifamily zoning requirement for MBTA communities. This is the most significant change in zoning in more than 40 years, and it will make it possible to create homes for people, to support local businesses, to reduce car dependency, and stabilize rents. All communities that are served by the MBTA must zone for multifamily housing as of right, with a greater obligation for those communities that have better access to transit stations. And this is in contrast to the current process for zoning approvals and special permits, which can make it almost impossible to create the homes that we need. So Winchester is a commuter rail community under the MBTA designations, which means you must create and approve an as-of-right zoning district, with the capacity of at least 1,220 units of multifamily housing over a minimum of 37 acres. And 50% of that district must be within a half-mile radius of a commuter rail station. There's a lot of technical assistance out there to help communities adopt this zoning and to move it forward. And the guidance also clarifies that communities can require affordability through a local inclusionary zoning policy or through the state's Smart Growth Law, Chapter 40R. So we are encouraging all communities to adopt 40R districts so that we can see more affordable homes created as a part of future development that is being enabled through Chapter 3A. Ultimately, we can't build what's not allowed. So zoning is the tool our communities use to determine what can and can't get built. Zoning has historically been rooted in segregation and shaped by redlining, and the effects have lasted for generations. By zoning for multifamily housing, that will create opportunities for people across income levels and create a future where everyone can thrive. In addition to multifamily zoning for MBTA communities, planning means that we're working to establish statewide and local housing production goals, which I know you are working on here in Winchester, establishing multifamily zoning in every community, not just those served by the MBTA, and establishing effective inclusionary zoning. Inclusionary zoning is where, when market rate development is built, affordable homes are also required as a portion of that. So when we get more development, we also get homes that are targeted to people who are low and moderate income. Our next P is production, which helps us to prepare for that growth that will come. So we have to build homes at all price points to allow housing production, and we have to invest our financial resources to make those homes affordable for people with low incomes. So zoning creates the ability for homes to be built, but we need to make sure they are affordable to people at all price points. In other words, we need to build the homes that we need. So we strive to do this through a lot of strategies. We are working to increase funding for affordable housing development. We are working to make rental assistance available to all who are eligible. If you've been working with anyone over the last couple of years trying to get rental assistance, you know the wait lists are incredibly long. We're working to build new home ownership opportunities through the Commonwealth Builder Program. And we're working to encourage local communities like Winchester to prioritize their local funding for affordable housing. We also need to take action to preserve affordable homes. That's our third P, preservation. And also help people stay in their communities. So people who are already living in our community may be at risk of displacement, foreclosure, eviction, and we also don't want to lose the homes that are already in our communities to disrepair or foreclosure. So we're working towards ensuring emergency assistance is available to people who might be at risk of homelessness or foreclosure or eviction. Often we say there are people who are one paycheck away, right, from eviction, from foreclosure. And with a very small amount of money, we can keep them stably housed, safe, healthy, and in their communities. We also are working on right to counsel for tenants. This is essentially allowing counsel for anyone who's facing eviction. We're working on redeveloping public housing, making it safe and healthy, and also increasing state and federal funding for public housing. It's an asset that we have in many of our communities that needs to be preserved. And then we are also working on funding deep energy retrofits for affordable housing and for homeowners with low and moderate incomes. Again, we know when we have better energy efficiency, we have healthier outcomes for our communities and for our families. And lastly, we need to invest in our most important asset, our people, or our fourth P. We must invest financially in people and places historically kept out of and for whom the market and zoning has not and simply won't provide opportunities. So we at CHAPA do this, and we encourage our communities that we work with to do this by helping people buy their first home, especially in communities of color, to close the racial homeownership gap. We also work to build more homeownership opportunities, provide down payment and other homeownership buying assistance, homeownership counseling and education, and supporting community-based organizations to ensure our fair housing laws are being enforced and strengthened. At the local level where I work and where I've been lucky enough to work with the Winchester Housing Coalition, we seek to have impact through systemic change through the method of public participation at its essence. Unfortunately, as I mentioned before, we often find that strong and vocal opposition to affordable housing and multifamily development can really drive decision-making. And there's often a significant disconnect between publicly elected and appointed leaders and the people who are experiencing housing instability in their communities. They're not the voices that are being elevated and heard. So our role in the Municipal Engagement Initiative is to help bring together diverse coalitions and bring together education and resources to build consensus and bridge gaps between any lack of understanding about affordable housing and the potential solutions. So we know that every community has unique housing challenges. What we try to do is bring together big tent coalitions to support affordable housing production. And I've worked with enough communities in Massachusetts to know that the one thing everyone has in common is that every community will say, we are unique, we're different than our neighbors. So I never would come into a community and say, these are the solutions that I think you have to create, but there's a lot of tools that we have at our disposal that we can learn from, that we can experiment with, and we can all make an impact on this. So all of these efforts together, really, we're trying to change that local conversation about affordable housing to be more positive, to empower those who are impacted by a lack of affordable housing, to elevate the pro-affordable housing voices above their opponents, and set the stage for diverse and sustainable coalitions. Ultimately, this engagement work and this coalition building results in housing getting built, and we've seen that success in many of our communities that we've worked with. And we, again, to circle back, we do this because we know that affordable housing reduces health inequities, it stabilizes communities and individual families, and it roots out this structural and institutional racism that we so want to root out. We're always looking for local partners to do this work. It's exciting to have Winchester be a part of it. And thank you very much for having me here tonight.
Thank you very much. So I hope as you're all sitting out there that some of the things that Dan has said, I think they'll be familiar to you. There are many people in the audience, as you know them, and they in fact have been in the trenches in terms of trying to advance one project or another. Oftentimes what happens is that these larger questions of the benefits of more affordable housing for our community all become focused through the filter of a specific project, which tends to take on a life of its own. So I think what you were describing in terms of the community conversation, the long-term conversations that need to take place and we need to engage people with, to not only be able to recognize the tools that are increasingly available to us, but also what the opportunities for us are as a community, I think is so important. So I hope that there'll be people here who may be able to speak to that a little bit in terms of our experience here. But thank you very much. So our last speaker is Sarah Bettencourt. No relationship, in fact, a complete misspelling to our select board member. Sarah asked me to point that out. She didn't want any confusion about that. Sarah's a reporter for the GBH Center for Investigative Reporting and is a reporter on the Priced Out series. She covered housing policy as a former staffer for Commonwealth Magazine, was a senior immigration reporter for Law 360. Sarah covered politics, health, and social issues for publications like The Guardian, Dig Boston, The Boston Globe, and the Associated Press, and has enjoyed over a decade in Massachusetts media. Hopefully you've enjoyed most of it. Anyway, that's it, yeah. She holds awards from investigative reporters and editors and the New England Newspaper and Press Association. Sarah is a graduate of Emerson College, as is my son, I'm happy to report, and Columbia University, which he is not, and is a member of the National Association of Hispanic Journalists. Sarah?
Hello. Oh, Okay, it works. Thank you for the introduction, and it's very hard to come after Dana and Megan, but I really appreciate the invite. So I'm Sarah Bettencourt. I like to consider myself a fly on the wall, a sponge, and a microscope as a reporter, and I'm really here to learn from you. So as Tom mentioned, I used to cover housing policy with more of a focus on the State House back at Commonwealth Magazine. I think it was to about the first half of the pandemic. And now I've shifted over to the Center for Investigative Reporting, where we have fantastic project managers that have decided to make housing reporting a priority at GBH News. So we have the Priced Out series. We're focusing with several reporters on different parts of Massachusetts. We've been in communities talking with folks about the issues they care about most. And health is definitely something that's popped up in conversations many times, and also in stories. So I started housing reporting back in college for tiny community papers, mostly writing about housing courts and immigrants. And housing is a beat that intersects with so many other things. I've mostly seen it from the immigration perspective, but over the years, healthcare, business, politics, that's a huge one. And it's more important now than ever, considering how significantly the price of housing has increased over the past few years. So I really appreciate being on the panel. I do want to talk a little bit about some of the work we've done most recently on Priced Out. And a lot of it, while not necessarily focused on healthcare and some of the more pertinent issues that Megan mentioned on asthma and some of the effects of being in more dangerous areas and having housing, in areas that might not be as safe. Something that's popped up constantly with renters, which I've mostly covered renters, but hopefully we'll start to transition over to home ownership as well, is this anxiety. So I recently wrote about the Tenant Opportunity to Purchase Act, and it's ongoing legislation that's popped up on Beacon Hill for the past 5 years. And it's an effort where community organizations want to go in and buy, particularly CDCs, multifamily buildings that are up for sale and own them and try to keep rent affordable. And in the process of reporting that story, I interviewed a woman named Annie Gordon, who's 72 years old. She lives in Mbta, a neighborhood of Boston. And she's retired. She's lived in her unit, it's called Fairlawn Apartments, since she was 22. And she is now 72, so you do the math. And she is being priced out. She was paying $1,800 a month. And when a new owner came in 2018, the rent was raised to $2,200 a month. And as many people know in the community, if you're on a fixed income, as a senior, a price increase of $400 a month can be so significant. So now, at 72, she's going back to work, part-time, 30 hours a week at Walmart, starting work at 6 in the morning, so she gets on the bus at 5. And it's having some health impacts, not just anxiety, but also her knees, arthritis. It's something that's not easy to do at 72. And hearing those kinds of stories really makes me wonder, I know this isn't just in Boston. It isn't just this one person. And we really want to hear the stories of people across Massachusetts that are facing these issues. Now, the Priced Out series has focused on 4 to 5 communities in Massachusetts where we had gotten research from the Warren Group last winter saying these are the 5 communities where housing prices have gone up the most. I live in East Boston. I happen to be reporting on East Boston because that went up 227% since 2011. But other communities are seeing it everywhere. We have a reporter in Worcester, Sam Turkin, who reported on a gentleman who is a veteran in his 70s, has lived in the same, it's like a house, but small, since, I believe, the past 30 years. And now his landlord wants to fix it up and sell the place. So he doesn't know what to do because he hasn't been in the rental market for 30 plus years. I mean, the internet wasn't around. It's a significant barrier for people in different stages of life. So we've sort of focused on different things. In Weymouth, my colleague Liz Niesloss has followed a teacher who is being priced out of that community, and it happened very suddenly. And in a lot of these situations, that's what we hear from tenants over and over. It's happened suddenly. My income hasn't increased in any way, shape, or form. I don't know what to do. And I don't know what resources to go to, or the resources that do exist are faulty. So part of what we want from Priced Out is to find solutions, and we're starting to dig into more policy ideas. But we also want to hear more from the community about those intersections that I talked about at the very beginning: health, disability rights, race, and senior housing as well. So I really appreciate being on the panel, and I really do want to hear from all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. So, you know, as we think about the science behind this and the research and the statistics and analysis which lead us to understand this connection, right? Something we all really, as Megan said, we all actually already know, but it's just become more and more clear. And I think that, as Dana was saying, that when you realize what the gap is between the amount of housing we have and the kind of housing we have and what we need, then it invariably leads to the stories that Sarah is talking about, I think. And people, individual people who are really suffering in a way that surprises them at whatever stage in life they happen to be. Some of that is happening here, but what occurs to me is that we not only need to continue to engage each other in this for the sake of our own community, but we do have a part to play statewide with other people, other communities like us and not like us, because we're never going to close that gap unless we all do something, right? I grew up in Ohio, and I still have relatives out there, and I'm always struck by the cost of housing in Ohio as compared to here. It's extraordinary. And what that allows people to do in terms of disposable income, but also what it means for them in terms of the health implications of being in a state where, in fact, there are more options for people, and the options that are there tend to be more affordable. So I really would like to turn it over to you, and I'm hoping that people will have questions or comments. There'll be things that, you know, you've heard me talk, so nothing is going to be too silly to say. I want to encourage you on that. And see if we can help each other continue to kind of understand what we've heard tonight and how it might relate to us. Anybody?
I was only a little taller. Keep one mic with you guys.
Yep. Yeah, that's fine.
Thank you. I had a question. My name's Karen Garrett. I'm a real estate broker locally. And one of the things we see in town, especially in this most recent market, because we're feeling this housing shortage, and we see the impacts across all sorts of different demographics of people. We think about a lot of times older people who are living in homes, and the numbers about the affordability and just the stress about being able to afford your next mortgage and utilities and the upkeep on a house. What have you seen in terms of zoning changes and flexibility and just creativity around accessory units for parents, for example? I know some of that's happening in California more than it's happening here. It seems like that's something locally we should be thinking about in terms of taking care of older people. The health outcomes of being with your family and being with family members is certainly better than an institution or nursing home. But
So accessory dwelling unit.
yeah, I mean, I think we all think about we need to build new, and that is really important. It's also really hard for a lot of different reasons, but some accessory options can be fairly simple, but it requires some creativity and flexibility locally at the zoning board level.
So Dana, do you want to?
And I'll let you guys chime in as well. But yeah, I mean, accessory dwelling units are a wonderful strategy that a lot of communities are starting to explore. There's a great report by Amy Dane. I can share the link to that for folks. But a lot of communities allow, and just to go back, accessory dwelling units, which is a technical term, you may know them as like a granny flat or a cottage house, or sometimes it's a carriage house, depends on the community you're in. Some people think of them as tiny homes, but they don't have to be tiny. It's essentially just another unit or home on the same parcel as a primary dwelling, a primary single family or a two family, et cetera. So a lot of communities do allow accessory dwelling units in their zoning, but they have a lot of restrictions put on them that makes it essentially impossible to create. And so Amy's report really digs into what are the best strategies communities can use to make sure they are actually built. So allowing them to be both attached and detached, allowing them to be of a size that is livable, allowing them to be in either existing or non-existing new build, allowing them to be occupied by people who are related or not related. That's a big restriction that communities put on. And I think that your point is really important because often we think of as accessory dwelling units as a place where a senior might be able to downsize themselves, but it also might be a place for a health aide to live. It might be a place for a young family member to move back when they can't yet afford to live there. It might be a place for just extra income for that senior who's on a fixed income. So there's a lot of really great benefits for it. I worked in Acton, and they just passed, time is wonky these days, but a few years ago they passed some changes to their accessory dwelling unit ordinance, and one of the big drivers of that was adult children with mental and physical health disabilities who wanted a little bit of independence, couldn't maybe live fully independent, but if they lived in an accessory dwelling unit near their family, they really could gain that. So I think it's a great strategy, and for you all to think about how can you remove as many barriers to that production as possible.
Great, thank you. And thank you for the question. So how do you think I know you can't speak for the real estate community, but how do you think the real estate community feels about the possibility of Winchester approving, maybe even at the fall town meeting, an accessory dwelling unit bylaw?
I mean, we hear this all the time, and we hear this from both homeowners, but also from builders, but because affordability becomes such an issue, and because the costs of nursing homes and elder care is so sky high, there's a real need from a lot of different demographics to at least start considering that, and maybe it's worth looking at what Acton has done and other towns. I think that's, when we look at affordability and health, it seems like that's sort of like low-hanging fruit, because it requires some flexibility and creativity on the town's level, but that seems like a conversation we could all have pretty easily. So I think in terms of our own community, I'm looking at my colleagues here, that's an easy conversation to have, but I also think in terms of clients that we've worked with who are looking forward to the next step, but going to a nursing home is expensive and just unaffordable, but I have kids in the next town, but their house is too small, or their town wouldn't let them change the garage into an accessory unit, like an in-law suite. And we come into issues like the town doesn't want you to have another stove in that outbuilding or a bathroom in that. I think we all know what we're talking about. But that, to me, seems like there would be a lot of support behind there, just my opinion, but because it impacts a lot.
It does seem like something we can do, right? We could do that.
Sure.
There's the other Bettencourt in the room who is a select board member. Mike, maybe you just want to just take like a minute to just describe the bylaw that is being pushed around right now.
Sure, I'll actually defer to Eugene or Sally here.
Oh, okay.
They're a little bit more educated on this tonight, but
I'll just say that we had a planning board meeting last night, and we voted to sponsor the bill on ADU bylaw for town meeting fall. So that should be starting to get introduced throughout these boards and committees, and we hope to hear from comments like this about how we can, hone it and make it so that it's a lot more accessible, and that we would promote it rather than just sort of, say a law but not have it be an actual production within town. So.
Yes, absolutely. I think that is, when we talked before a little bit about the people within our community who are feeling the stress of being house poor, right? They have big homes, but they're increasingly expensive to occupy. And they want to stay in our community, but they don't have another option, right? The accessory dwelling unit bylaw, if it's in fact not cluttered with all kinds of restrictions and is pretty clean and targeted, which I'm hopeful that the one that will emerge from the planning board will be, would provide some people with an option, right? Not everyone, because it can be expensive to make that conversion. But it could be less expensive for many people than their current situation, right? And they could provide the support, particularly for older people or people who have some sort of disability. It could provide the support that allows them to remain a vital part of our community, something that would benefit all of us. So anyway, I think that's one thing that hopefully we all need, as you see that coming forward, we all need to engage in that conversation and talk to other people about it so that it hopefully happens and we get the best bylaw possible. How about anybody else? Other questions, comments? Senator?
Thanks, Tom. Oops. I'm State Senator Jason Lewis, and it's great to be here tonight. I just wanted to chime in to say what an excellent and thought-provoking this discussion has been tonight, and real credit to our fantastic panelists, and thank you, Tom, and everyone who's involved in organizing this very important conversation locally. We've really seen a sea change, I think, in Winchester around the focus on housing, and specifically, of course, affordable housing, and I think many of us would agree that's long overdue. I would say that the crisis facing us when it comes to lack of quality affordable housing is probably one of the top 2 or 3 greatest challenges facing the future vitality of certainly the greater Boston region. I probably would not have said that 5 or 10 years ago, the time I've been in the legislature, but that is clearly the case today, and I think would be shared probably, Dana, by most of my colleagues in the legislature, most of whom are not, housing experts. And that's not by accident. I don't have the numbers at my fingertips, you might, but the housing production in Massachusetts in the last several decades is far, far below what the new housing production was in the previous several decades. So there has been a sea change in the number of new housing units of all different sizes and types and affordability levels, in the last few decades. And there's a variety of reasons for that. But certainly some of those are the challenges we've talked about tonight. What I can tell you is that housing policy is one of the most challenging issues that we deal with, certainly in the state legislature. I might be fair to say on the local level, right, in local government as well. And that's for a variety of reasons. It's complicated, for those who this is not necessarily their wheelhouse. You're talking about a massive problem that sometimes can feel overwhelming. You're talking about potentially very large sums of money because if you're talking about providing greater subsidies, if you're talking about, the funds that we need for our housing authorities, which is a huge challenge, only touched on tonight, if you're talking about what we need to do to provide incentives to private developers to build housing that is affordable and deeply affordable, that takes very significant incentives. Where does that money come from? It's taxpayer money. So there's a lot of complicated funding issues. And then probably the biggest challenge is that probably, I'm guessing everybody who's here tonight is here because you are social justice minded and you care about people being housed. You probably believe housing is a basic right. You probably intuitively understand the connection to health and the well-being of children. But I can assure you, lots and lots of people out there who are not here tonight don't necessarily share that. And not that they're ill-intentioned, but they focus more on, we don't need more density, it changes the character of the community. We don't need more density, it's going to bring more traffic to the neighborhood, and there's too much traffic already, and who's going to argue with that? We don't need more housing because it's going to put more children in our schools, and our schools are already overcrowded, and we are already struggling to hire enough teachers and do everything else we need to do to support our kids, and on and on. And I can tell you that those are the arguments that I hear a lot. Again, from good, well-intentioned people who probably intuitively get that we need to build more housing and get a lot of the arguments, but in any given, well, particularly when it's a given project and it happens to be one that's in their neighborhood, but even beyond that. So I think what really has to change is we need people to understand these issues, which is exactly the conversation we're having tonight at a deep level, to have these conversations, with our neighbors and friends, and really to have more people that are willing to engage and support these kinds of policy changes at Winchester Town Meeting, because I can assure you, this is not going to sail through the ADU proposal. I'm sure there are people in the room tonight who will be there and will strongly support it, but I'm sure there'll be people who will speak in strong opposition to it as well, because they'll say, where are the cars going to park for the ADU? And what's going to happen to the character of the neighborhood and other issues? Because when we've tried to do these kinds of policies at the state level, those are the kinds of arguments that get made. So it's going to takes more people to really, I think, want to learn about these issues and want to engage in a positive way in the local level here in Winchester and other towns, and to, frankly, lobby and put pressure on people like me and others at the state level. CHAPA does a great job of that, absolutely. And have people, journalists writing about this and bringing this up in the public consciousness. But that's, what it takes. And that is having a positive impact. I'll wrap up in one moment, but I don't want to make it seem like there's, we're not making progress here. The state legislature, and it's been very bipartisan, which is one good thing we can say about this, trying to tackle the issue. We've passed, made several big changes in the last few years. The one which we touched on, which is the Mbta zoning, which impacts, actually it's a very large number of communities. It's 175, because 175 cities and towns are served in some way by the Mbta. Some of that's bus service, et cetera. So a very large number of communities are going to have to put in place this by right multifamily zoning. It doesn't guarantee affordable housing, right? So it's very important that communities put in place an inclusionary zoning or a requirement that a certain percentage of that is affordable. But that was a big change. That was hotly debated for many, many years. And as you can imagine, many communities, including the Massachusetts Municipal Association, which is a very powerful voice on Beacon Hill, was opposed to that, and has always been opposed to that. And then the other change we made, which was also very significant, was changing in order to change certain zoning in town meeting, it used to require a 2/3 vote, which can be very difficult to get a 2/3 vote, but now it only requires a majority vote. So that's another change that is hopefully going to unlock more potential for things like ADUs, accessory dwelling units, multifamily housing. So those are important steps. And again, I'm mentioning that because the point is that when people do learn about these issues and they do organize, and wonderful organizations like CHAPA and many social justice groups and public health groups and environmental groups, make the effort to educate local leaders, state leaders, change can happen. major change. But the problem is so great that we've got to really redouble our efforts and focus on this. So I guess I want to leave a message of optimism that we can tackle this crisis. If we were having the conversation about climate change, I would probably deliver a similar message. But it's going to take, a lot of work, and it's going to take more people, who are not in the room tonight, to be supportive, or at least not oppositional to the kinds of changes we need.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Jason. Appreciate it. Yeah, sir. Are you going to ask Jason if that was all on the record?
Assumption it is, but actually, I just wanted to thank Karen for the question, and I'm very happy the word zoning was mentioned for two reasons. One, I just got approved to work on a deep dive on zoning starting the month of October, so you may hear from me October 1st. And I think it's an incredibly important issue for the second reason, and I was talking to a couple audience members before this about this. Today, the Democratic gubernatorial and lieutenant governor candidates released their housing platform. And, it was quite a laundry list, and I was intrigued by that because Lieutenant Governor candidate Kim Driscoll, Salem mayor, has been so heavily involved with housing policy as mayor over the past few years. So it was quite a long list, but of course it was to increase housing stock, lower costs, to implement to the fullest extent the Housing Choice Initiative, but also to require, as of right, multifamily zoning districts around Mbta stations, to expand mass rental vouchers and alternative housing voucher programs. So it's going to be interesting to see how a new administration impacts housing policy, especially when you have someone so interested in housing policy, because every time you have a new administration, they bring their choice issues to the table. And considering the price of rent, the price of mortgages, it seems like this would be an important issue.
It'll be interesting, right, what is happening now in so many different areas, right? We have big issues and opportunities, whether it's transportation, climate, housing, kind of inequity in terms of everyone being able to share in what is an absolutely, incredible Massachusetts economy. But in the end, if we want that economy to keep going, you can't be in a housing situation like we are, and we certainly can't have it get any worse, right? We're losing people, and we'll be losing the economy eventually, right? So it'll be interesting if we can all get our heads around the collaborative work that ultimately will be needed, and it certainly sounds like it's going to be necessary that all hands on deck, from the top down and from the bottom up, right? We ought to all meet up someplace to get stuff like this done. So, yes.
Hi, my name is Lily, and I'm an immigrant, and I've been here for 50 years, and I've been listening to all of you for 50 years, and I'm really disgusted. Every year, we vote for people in Boston, regardless what party we vote for. And every year for 50 years, everybody tells us on the TV what they're going to do for us. We all vote for people to say, I'm going to do this for you, I'm going to do that for you people. And mostly they have said, we're going to take care of the elderly, we're going to take care of the vets, we're going to improve your schools, and then they go on to silly things like the roads. And you've done nothing. Nothing. Now, I would like every mayor and every politician and every senator and every governor to hear what I have to say. I say shame on all of you. You've let every one of the people in Massachusetts down. We silly people vote for people every year, and you promise us the sun, moon, and the stars, and we get nothing. For 50 years, the housing is a disgrace here. It's an absolute disgrace. And you keep telling us what we're going to do and what we're going to do. You do nothing for the elderly, you do nothing for the handicapped, and you've done nothing for the vets, in my opinion. And I vote every year. I gave up my citizenship so I could vote here. And I love it. And I want to vote. And you do nothing. It's an absolute disgrace. I don't know what town in Massachusetts, and I read and I listen to the news very carefully. Can any of you people tell me what town in Massachusetts that you've done a good job, that you have housing, you have improved housing in any particular town? So we can go on, the people here can go and look and say, well, in South Boston or Wellesley or some town, we did a good job, we have improved things, and maybe we can copy that. It's the same story. You research, you put hours and hours into research, and you've done nothing for the people. Now, my other pet peeve is the transportation in Boston is a third world country. And I'd like to get all the politicians and send them to other countries and see how the trains and the transportation runs. And it's absolutely dreadful. If you've been on the red line or the green line, it is really hard. It's filthy. There's nothing good about the transportation system in Boston, and it should be good. Billions of dollars have been put into that, and you keep saying, we're going to do this for you, and you do that. It's lousy. I just came back from 3 different countries, and I hate to tell you what I said when I got off in Boston. I was sad when I saw the dirt and the filth of the streets that we have in Boston. We don't even pick up the dirt. We do nothing for the people, and yet everybody works very hard here. We are workaholics, including me. We pay big taxes, and we get nothing.
Thank you. Can I ask you something?
Yes.
Do you live in Winchester?
I do now. I didn't always live in Winchester, but I do
no, that's
now.
okay. No, I just, because I was going to ask, if there are things, in fact, where you live, what really means most to you? Is it your neighbors? Is it your...
Well, let's put it like this. I've been to 20 countries around the world, so I've looked at things. I'm an immigrant. I am not a rich person under any circumstances. But I've lived and worked in a few different countries. I love America. There is no place greater on the planet than this place. But I am so sad and so disgusted that I hear from all the politicians in the world promising great Americans what they're going to do for us. They've done, I can't point what you've done. Yeah. I hear people saying in different towns the school systems are bad. I hear this from a lot of people. They shouldn't be bad. Yeah. This is America.
Well, what I would say, so first of all, I appreciate you saying that, right? Because there are many people in this room who think that we have much to improve upon. But I will also say that there is much that we should be really grateful for, and including our schools. Transportation system certainly needs a lot of work. But, healthcare is not equitably distributed, but on the other hand, it's present for many people. There are many things, I guess what I'm trying to say, that in fact allow us to continue to make more progress. And I think the people in this room, the civic engagement that we're seeing is really kind of an example of that. So I remain hopeful, even though I know the challenges in front of us are big. Is there anybody else who has questions or comments? Yes, over there.
Sorry, we had one person there and then... Yeah.
Hi, so thank you very much for all of your remarks tonight. Was it me or someone else with a question? Oh, sorry. So the question I wanted to ask earlier was, when all of you spoke, I noticed sort of a combination of stories, personal stories, things that might appeal a little bit to people's emotions, mixed with facts. So 227% increase in the price of housing, those sort of facts and figures that might appeal to the rational arguments. So when we leave tonight and we go talk to our families or talk to our neighbors or talk to our friends, I wonder if you could share a little bit about what you've seen work in those conversations, whether it's a mix of stories and facts, or how else we can sort of bring more people into this conversation.
We're on again. Okay. It's a great question. I think for me, I always try to lead with the why and the who. So I don't try to lead with facts and figures. I have them. I have a lot of numbers up here. I've got a lot of research and reports that I want to be able to refer to. I'm always going to be making policy recommendations based on the data, the research, the stories. But I want to try to connect with people on, their personal stories. So we often do in our coalition building work an activity called the life cycle of housing. And I ask people to think through, in your personal life, what type of housing have you lived in? What have your needs been when you were a child, when you age? What do you envision as you get older? What do you envision for your family? What have the struggles been at different stages of your life and your family and your friends' lives? What has your stable housing been able to do for you? If you've had housing instability in your life, what has that meant for you? I think we take for granted how deeply connected we all are to that. So that's the why. And then I also like to talk a lot about the who. Who is it that we're talking about? We often in my work, and I'm guilty of this as well, we talk about units and production and numbers, and we literally talk about homes as units, but it's a home. It's a place where someone is going to live. So making that connection. And then helping them to understand, listening to the fears, because I think a lot of the time when people are opposed to new strategies and tools, it's coming from a place of fear. So hearing those fears and helping work through, okay, I hear that, how can we mitigate that potential impact? As opposed to saying, I'm scared of this thing, we're gonna not do it. Hear what's really driving that fear, and how can we mitigate those potential impacts. So that would be my recommendation. And I also think that the stories are really important. Putting a face and a name to what we're working towards is critically important.
Hello? Sorry, I don't want people to have to stay longer. But my question is regarding, you said it's important to build more housing, which is entirely true. What kind of housing is built? Because when I look around in my part of town over the years, all I've seen is that smaller, older houses just vanish and are being replaced by huge, enormous houses that are easily all $1.5 million and above. And yes, they're new houses, but how can we help to ensure that what's built is not just oversized and overpriced, because these houses are only accessible to a very small percentage of potential buyers, and definitely do not help elderly or disabled people in any way, shape, or form. And are there any tools at our disposal to make sure that that's not all that's built? Because those are new houses, but, for like 10% of the people, maybe.
Yep, and it's a problem in our community, as we all know. Do you want to take a crack at that? I don't know.
Sorry, thank you.
So this is definitely a deeper conversation, and I'd be happy to have that deeper conversation with folks. Be happy to have that deeper conversation with folks in Winchester about all of the different strategies and tools. But one thing, again, I would ask you to go back and think about, what does your zoning allow to be built? So if you don't allow 3 homes to be built on a parcel, you allow only 1, developers are going to build what they can maximize for their profit. If you don't allow, if you require excessive parking, that drives up the cost of the housing that you're building, and that cost has to get passed on. So thinking at that level about what you allow to be built. And then, on the other hand, you can only go so far with that. On the other hand, what are the resources you're putting towards affordability? So do you have funds? Do you have Community Preservation Act funds? Do you have funds in your housing trust fund that you can use to deepen the affordability, right? Even if it gets built for people who are low income, extremely low income, on fixed incomes, it still might not be affordable to those those people that we want to serve. So how can you use those resources to deepen the affordability once homes are built? So that's a quick answer to your story, but a lot of strategies out there.
Great. Anybody else? Yes.
Definitely have room for one more.
Oh, wait, we'll go over here and then we'll come over to you, okay?
This is very short. I just want to thank you all because I'm a couple years from retirement and I've been starting to think about where do I want to put my energies once I retire, what are the areas I want to get involved in to volunteer, and I think I can leave tonight knowing this is definitely something that I'm very interested in and want to keep working, want to start to work on. I have a lot to learn, but thank you very much.
Thank you.
Do we have one more? Yeah.
Hi everyone, Lisa Carey Moore, and I'm director of the Buildings Program at the International Living Future Institute. We're actually a green building certification organization, but we're much more than that. Our mission is to support a culturally rich, ecologically restorative, and socially just living community. And so when we work with developers and those who are talking about affordable housing, and we're strategizing about how to make the pitch, it's actually not so much the personal stories, because we typically don't have to convince people that health is important, that we want to keep kids from getting asthma, we want to keep people from being sick and missing work and having all the costs associated with that. So we talk about how well-designed and planned affordable communities can reduce energy use, can reduce the consumption of water, can reduce the bills that anybody would have to pay so that those people can put that money back into their community or their children's education funds or whatever their needs are. We require reduction in parking, ride share, bike share, all sorts of amenities that make for a stronger community and reduce the burden and the costs associated with the program. So I think there are so many different narratives we can tell, and I'm sitting here thinking tonight a little bit guiltily that I haven't been involved yet in these issues in my own community, but like what case studies can we bring from around the country in terms of communities that are maybe similar to our communities, because you don't want to go to a major urban area and bring that example to Winchester for their consideration. You want to kind of find those models and case studies that can, I think, resonate with people. So thank you all for the insight tonight, and hopefully I'll be more involved.
Yeah, thank you. Do you live in Winchester?
I do.
Oh, we're going to have to get you involved. There's no question about that.
Yes.
Sorry. You'll have to sign up before you leave. But do you want to, Megan, do you want to say anything else?
I would just say, I've sometimes joked a little bit that, like, I went to medical school and sometimes I think the degree I should have gotten is an urban planning degree. And part of it is because where someone lives is one of the most powerful interventions to creating healthy people and healthy communities. And so I just want to, I hope that you walk away from tonight thinking that we can be in the health business together. And I think that really is something, I believe that there are powerful models and powerful examples of where it works. And I think Winchester can really dive in and become one of those communities that bends towards justice and health. So I really appreciate the opportunity to be here tonight. Thanks.
Thank you. We said we'd wrap up around 8:30, and it's around 8:30. Does anybody else have a question? May we get it?
Thank you so much for all the information, but I just hear a lot of discussion about policy change and zoning, and all of those things take an inordinate amount of time. I mean, it can be years. And when you're talking about some of the stories you were mentioning about senior citizens who are in a bind right now, who are trying to pay their rent, I just wonder if you have any advice or somewhere that they can go immediately if they're looking for subsidies or a way that they can make their, for a renter, for example, someone who's paying, $2,000 a month and they're on a fixed income and they can't really wait for an ADU, or if that's not an option, or if they can't wait for the zoning to change or the policy to change, which may take years. What's your advice, and what are some of the resources that you would, in the short term, recommend that they go to?
Yeah, so I do think that one of the fastest solutions to helping people afford their rent is through rental vouchers, right? And we have an amazing Massachusetts version. You heard Sarah mention it in the Lieutenant Governor candidate's plan. The MRVP is the Mass Rental Voucher Program. And that is an amazing program that has been really innovative over the last couple of years. There are special versions for people with disabilities, so alternative housing rental voucher programs. You heard her mention that AHVP. And so I think those are things that are easily expandable, right? You call your senator, he's standing right over here, and you talk to him and you say, I'd like to see an expansion of the MRVP and AHVP program, and I'd like to make sure that seniors in my community can stay in my community. And those can be right off the shelf.
I would like to point out, though, that she was requesting urgent.
Oh, urgent, yeah, sorry.
All of those things start incredibly long, especially in the state of Massachusetts. So that's not going to be a quick fix, because a lot of times those are going to be a 10-plus year waiting list before you can do it. So I think what she was asking is for resource networks for people who are interested.
One of the things, Winchester doesn't have a sort of a dedicated social services department, right? We don't have that. I suspect that may be true with many suburban communities of our size. And so some of the work that these women have done has really pointed towards the power of the connection between combining housing and various social services, and that they kind of all leverage each other in a certain way for better outcomes. In a way, Winchester doesn't quite have that, but we do have, at the Jenks Center, for example, we have a social worker. We do get questions about housing all the time. Some of them are quite urgent and immediate, and sometimes, not always, we're able to find solutions for people. So I would suggest that might be one possibility that ought to be explored, and if nothing else, you'll have an advocate that can try to help along the way until we get a solution that works. Felicity, did you want to say something? Right, I'm glad you mentioned that. So the Fletcher Fund is a fund that was established years and years ago. It does provide some immediate relief. It is not something that over a longer period of time is helpful, but it is helpful in a sort of event of an immediate crisis, the possibility of a dislocation of some sort. And so those referrals are then made through the social worker at the Jenks Center to the select board. And it's all confidential, but it has been helpful for many people. So that's just another possibility. Yeah.
All right. I did want to actually address something a few questions back, if I could do that. So I've been keeping this long note about solutions journalism and solutions in the community. I mean, journalists, despite what a lot of people may think, tell more than sad stories. Something I'm interested in is policy reporting. And so, I mean, it depends on the community that you live in, and I'm not too familiar with Winchester itself. I don't know if new rental units being built are studios, 1 bedrooms, 3 bedrooms, and what the needs are of families here, but I could tell you what I've seen. So in East Boston, a lot of the new developments being built are small one-bedroom or studio apartments, and the people who are going there can afford extremely high rental prices. Now, the people who remain in East Boston as longtime residents or want to move to East Boston are looking for 3-bedroom apartments, 2, 3, 4-bedroom apartments, and they cannot find them for the right price. So a recent story that we did was focused on mixed income neighborhood trust model, and it's the first of its kind being proposed on the East Coast. It's been done in Kansas City and Tulsa, so much smaller cities-ish than Boston. And the idea here is like you have an already existing building. Your turnover, at least in this particular case in East Boston, it's called the Blue Line Portfolio, is 40%. So every year, 40% of the people move in, move out. And there's 3-bedroom apartments all over. So now they're proposing this model where community organizations go in as a trust, buy the building, are the landlords, keep rents low, or in the situation where the rents are high, for the new families coming in during that turnover, they rent at affordable rates, and the people who can afford to pay more for the 2-bedroom units are sort of subsidizing in a way. And the city council in Boston actually just delegated, I think it was about $100,000 toward that, and it's something that's going to be in the works for the next few months, but it's housing that already exists, and it's a much faster solution than building and dealing with zoning. So it's important to look at all of these different options, and it's something I did want to mention.
And I would just add on the last point about urgent needs, I think what you're raising is that what we have right now is insufficient. So we want to work at every level, right? On increasing vouchers, on increasing production, on preserving those homes, making sure people can access them. But in the immediate term, if someone is looking for assistance, yes, you have some resources here in Winchester. You're also part of the Greater Boston Network. Metro Housing Boston is a great resource. Call CHAPA. We will connect people up with the right resource. So there are groups out there who are working on immediate needs, but you're raising the point that it simply is insufficient.
Okay, so one more question. Can our select board member answer that question? Did you hear the question?
I did. No, that's a great question. I don't really know actually where
Yeah. So we need to find that out. Many of us check that box. Does anyone else here know? No. I'd like to think that it's well spent, but yes. Yeah. Yeah, Sally, I think you are right, and I think it also points out that we probably need a little bit more of an explanation for people as to where that money is going, not just simply asking them for it, but assure them that it's going to the right place. But I think we're gonna wrap up. I want to thank all of you for being here. I want to thank our panelists. I think they have been fantastic. And you know, when we started out, we were saying that, you know, we would hope that we would get engagement, we would hope that we would learn a lot, and that what we learned would be of value to us as a community. And I think we've done all those things tonight. You know, I think that although we have challenges here, and, you know, as we do in many different places, we also have an ability to accomplish a great deal here. And I also think that, you know, there have been different times, whether it's on the environment or it's education or other things, I think we tend to challenge ourselves that we want to be a leader, you know, not just simply kind of do the right thing within our community, but be a leader within the Commonwealth. And I'd like to think that for who we are and the characteristics we have in our community, that we can figure out a way to do that with housing as well. And I think with all the engagement of the folks in this room and the conversations that we'll take out of it, that that's all possible. So, at any rate, I'm going to turn it over to Leora.
I have the pleasure of wrapping up this absolutely fantastic panel. Thank you again, panelists, for answering the call and coming from the different walks of your life and from Boston to be with us tonight. Thank you all for being here. I am spending a great deal of my life keeping the conversation going, so it feels strange to cut it off. I invite you all to stay. I invite you all to, if you dare, drink some coffee or water. And there are a lot of engaged folks in the room. There are also folks in the room wearing Winchester Housing Coalition stickers. Please look for them. We are going to have our next program very soon. I am working very hard. We are working very hard to keep this conversation going because change is happening on the ground in Winchester. Little bit, very slowly, incremental change. There is also some information here that I forgot to mention before. Some of it was recommended by our panelists. Some of it the Winchester Housing Coalition has put together. Thank you, all the co-sponsors for tonight. Thank you, Senator Lewis, for coming and joining us. And thank you all.